Hey YouTube, this is Scott back with another one of these videos where I'm just going to be going over the official UK Sega Saturn magazine. Don't really have as said in my last video, it was obviously some time ago. I've got issue 16 to the final issue of 38. The early issues are now going for quite a lot of money on eBay. And generally they don't come up in sort of auctions very often, so yeah, kind of missing the early issues unfortunately, which was exciting times for the Saturn really. But this is sort of like coming into the sort of midway part with the sort of Saturn's life really. Only lasted for a push 3 years, didn't it, in the UK. And really the last few magazines are really Dreamcast. But yeah, so this is sort of coming into just coming out of the first year of the Saturn and seeing where the lie of the land is. But yeah, we'll crack on and see what we think. Obviously, like I said, this has been quite some time since I've done one of these videos, so got a spare few 20 minutes, half an hour to run through it. I'm not too sure we'll be talking about it for that long, but we'll endeavour to. So the first one that you come across is a Spot commercial, Blackheads. So yeah, and looking very mid-90s with the advertising and the clothes and the hairs. Yeah, clearly, I guess gaming and Spots go together. So the first one, it was Virtua Fighter 3, which obviously never made it out on Saturn. It says it's been a huge month in terms of Sega news. Of course, the best time has always been concerning Sega's merging with toy company by Bandai, Sega Bandai. So obviously that never happened, did it, Sega Bandai? I think that there was talk of it happening, and Bandai obviously now merged with Namco in the end. So yeah, it would have probably, I don't know, would it have made much difference to Sega? I don't know. I think at the end of this generation, Nintendo and Sega should have probably merged. Would have been the best. Both consoles got a bit of a tonking off of the PlayStation, but yeah, in an ideal world. So it says Bandai merger, Sega are now able more than ever to battle with giant competition. In fact, Japanese observers have remarked that the mighty Nintendo might have to merge with someone in order to measure up with the behemoth companies that are Sony and Sega Bandai. Blah 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 blah. So it never happened. So contents, or index, I guess. Contents, that's one. Index is the other one. So you've got Manx TT, Scud Race, is that Toriko? 40, well, I'm not too familiar with that one. Hexen. 34, that's Soviet Strike. Yeah, so there you go, it's official, Lobotomy to produce Duke Nukem 3D. So, yeah, Lobotomy, they were really talented, obviously on the Saturn, weren't they? They really got to grips with the architecture, and they pretty much made, fantastic versions of, probably best of that generation, versions of Doom and Quake. Outside of sort of PCs, really. Certainly Duke really was something else. I've said in my Pickups video that Quake is on the Saturn is more of an interesting game to sort of go back to see how it plays and how they managed to do it. But Duke plays really well, whereas Quake's a bit of a chug fest on the Saturn. It's Abe's Odyssey, so that was quite interesting. Most realistic Saturn game yet. So obviously this didn't come out on Saturn. This was PlayStation only, wasn't it? And sort of quite famously, this was one of the companies that ditched the PS2 when they went to the Xbox with Munchies, obviously, didn't they? And they were saying it wasn't possible to do on the PS2; it was only possible on the Xbox. So it's as though it may not look it from these screenshots. GT Interactive's new signing set to be one of the most intriguing blends of arcade and adventure game we've played yet seen or had. And it is a really good game, Abe's Odyssey. It's it's really humorous, and it's really you really have to think about your how you plan each, because each screen is like a puzzle in itself, and you have to think about your options and how to best place, because it's kind of one hit death, but it's really funny how you can take over the enemies, you can mind control them, and you can go on a rampage. It's a really good game, well worth sort of checking out on the PlayStation. Star Wars is back. Okay, so it really doesn't have much relevance in the old Saturn game, but you can't avoid the fact that Star Wars has returned after 20 years. So this would have been when the remake or remasters come through. And obviously now there's a Star Wars every year, isn't there? Wild 9. So again, that was another game that didn't come out on the Saturn. So you can sort of tell that these sort of games were sort of mid, coming into the, really Saturn was sort of coming into, the sort of early development flaws, and developers starting to get their teeth into it. But the sales figures of the Saturn just weren't making it profitable, I imagine. So this was another game. Didn't make it. For some reason they got something there for Mars Attacks. Don't quite know why that is in there. It's the official Nintendo magazine. Obviously this only finished about a year ago, didn't it? Official Nintendo, which was quite strange considering obviously the Switch was around the corner. Yeah, that went on for years. Obviously the official PlayStation is still going. So Street Fighter 2, history in the making. So this is the blockbuster charts. So the top 10 video games for the Saturn is Tomb Raider, Destruction Derby, Alien Trilogy, Worldwide Soccer 97 Nights, Exhumed, Titan Wars, Street Fighter Alpha, Wipeout, and Battle Arena Toshinden. Sega merged with Bandai Shocker. Yes, obviously that never happened. 7. That's a great film. The Rock. That is a cracking film as well. I love a bit of Nicolas Cage, don't you? Who was the guy who did The Rock? It wasn't John Woo, is it? Is it John Woo? No, Jerry Bruckheimer, isn't it? He's it's that kind of nonsense, but it is a really, really good film. Resident Evil confirmed. Another game that didn't make it, Final Fight. Obviously this was originally a Streets of Rage pitch to Sega that they rejected. And then they, it says, in fact, we believe the game was actually intended to be a Streets of Rage game, however, Core showed an interest in making this a multi-format game and the idea was dropped. However, the Saturn version is quite a way ahead of the PlayStation version and should be out in September. So yeah, obviously never did. Area 51, that is a light gun game. Manx TT. What you'll notice with this magazine is as the content sort of dries up, you'll find that they kind of run out of things to say, whereas in the later issues this might be getting a sort of 8-page spread. In this one it's getting, well, effectively it's a 4-page spread with a big picture in it really. But I don't think this is actually, so Richard Leadbetter, he obviously mentioned him before, he's a bit of a legend in the sort of Saturn, UK Saturn scene. He was the editor of this magazine, and he's still going strong now. He basically pretty much runs Digital Foundry, and the guy really is an absolute beacon of knowledge. There's quite a few videos on Digital Foundry where he's talking about this sort of period of time, and it was quite interesting in terms of how they were trying to compete with the PlayStation, obviously in terms of magazine content as well, really. So I think this is arcade, isn't it? I don't necessarily think it's Saturn version. Yeah, I think this is the Saturn version. This is one of the better sort of Saturn Model 2 conversions. I think, in my opinion, I think it was Virtual Cop 2 was the closest sort of conversion to Model 2 specifically. But this was definitely really up there in terms of comparisons as well. Really good game. So you still have more on the Manx TT. Used to have it PAL, but don't have it at the moment, so we'll probably end up picking it up in Japanese form. Mass Destruction preview. This is a really good game itself. This is kind of a bit like I can't quite remember the N64 game, which was done by Rare. Blast, is it Blast Corps? Quite similar to that, where it is kind of you destroy everything, but some really, really good gameplay, really fun. You get set objectives, and you're a tank. It's kind of similar to, like I said, Blast Corps, and it's also kind of similar to like the Strike series, but more of an arcade deal. Comes in quite an unusual design for Saturn PAL cases, because it's in like a navy, an army kind of green case, so it stands out in a collection because it's really the only case that's not black. The only other one that springs to mind which wasn't black is the Shining Force, Shining the Holy Ark, which is the picture art is a kind of wraparound, the spine, whereas this is the only one that's sort of set colour. Unless there's any others, let me know. Black Dawn. I'm not familiar with this one. I think this was kind of looks like a Thunderhawk kind of game. I'm really not familiar with this one. I think this one did come out. Yeah, it did. Pretty forgettable, I think. Swagman. I was going to say Shagman there. So Swagman, kind of a bit like Zombies Ate My Neighbour. I think kind of looks like a bit of a SNES game. Obviously, everyone knows this is extremely expensive on the Saturn. Another Core game, and it shows just how much Core really did support the Saturn. They really gave it a fair crack, but they couldn't keep going with it. And even then, they still supported the Dreamcast with good level of support as well. But Core were really one of the big players in terms of the Mega Drive, weren't they? They did really well on that, and they naturally, because the Tomb Raider was originally a Saturn exclusive, wasn't it? And it was only when the sales didn't really stack up they pulled it to PlayStation. Yeah, obviously this is a very expensive game on the Saturn. Doesn't justify the asking price, in my opinion. I think the average is between £150 to £200 now these days. This is a PAL exclusive as well, so yeah, you're not going to get it in any other regions. You can get it on PlayStation, and I think it's literally about £10 or so. Toriko, again quite an unusual game. It's all full motion video with this sort of early CG rendering. I had not played it. I can't imagine it's a game that would really play too well these days with the kind of slow-paced, grainy, sort of blocky full motion video that you would have. Obviously, I'd imagine back in the day it used to be quite a novelty, but yeah. I think it was by Sega, so this would have been a Saturn exclusive. Lost Vikings. Not played this one. I know it kind of has a cooperative feel to it. So there's various characters have various actions, and you kind of get through the level. So to me, it kind of sounds like a kind of Lemmings type game, maybe, where certain Lemmings have certain skills and attributes, don't they? But again, not quite a I wouldn't say a pricey title, but it's not one of the cheaper titles these days. Letters. So these always make me laugh very much, especially from this kind of era, you know, the 16-bit, 32-bit, because they were just, I don't know if it was just the type of person that was writing into magazines at this point. It was, you know, obviously we didn't have the internet back then, and trying to get information or trying to get specific details from this was really the only sort of way. So for example, let's go this one. So this is not a slag down letter, but the AM departments aren't as good as you make them out to be. I mean, the conversions are excellent, they really are trying their best, but sometimes they convert games that are almost identical to the last one they converted. For instance, Virtua 1 is no different to the Virtua Fighter series, really, and the new Daytona, granted, looks good, but they've changed the game engine, which I think is a big mistake. Gareth Morgan, Halstead, Essex. So the AM departments, this is what Sega Saturn magazine, so the AM departments effectively invented the 3D beat 'em up when they came up with the original Virtua Fighter coin-up, and the reason they keep producing follow-ups is the gamers worldwide are constantly clamouring for more of the same. Having said that, the AM teams have produced plenty of world-beating arcade games that aren't fighting games. How about Virtua Cop 1 and 2, Virtua Racing, Daytona, Sega Rally, Outrun, Afterburn 2, Space Harrier, all them classic Sega titles which set new standards in their day. By the way, if you think Virtua 1 is no different to Virtua Fighter, you're probably not playing it right. Mind you, you're probably right about Daytona CCE, but that didn't issue for any AM departments, instead being handled by Sega of Japan CS teams. So yeah, that's probably quite a fair comment really. The guy, I don't think he's talking much cock there really. I think especially AM2, I mean, certainly now, I mean, some of their early games was under sort of Yu Suzuki's guidance were outstanding, and this was really the time when Sega was on song. I think the only time that Sega really was even more in terms of like originality and trying weird new things was the Dreamcast, and they were just flowing, you know, they were just throwing anything, you know, and hoping something would stick, you know, Seaman, Jet Set Radio, you know, Space Channel 5, everything, all these strange and weird titles. Originality was really something else. And obviously it's all sort of piped down now, the AMs. Question and answers. So it's just, will the lovely statue ever come out on Saturn? The sequel, Police Noughts, has been touted for Saturn, but it's unlikely to appear over here. So yeah, that's very true. It was obviously one of the games that got left in Japan. Statue did come out on the Saturn, but did it? I think it did. It did get a Saturn port, did it? I'm pretty sure it did, but again, I think it was Japan only. So Crusader, No Remorse. This was a really good game in its day. The Saturn and PlayStation versions are very different to the PC one, from what I know. Red Alert, so this is Soviet Strike. So this was when EA were soldiering on with the Saturn. But again, EA, you know, they had no reason to doubt the Saturn. You know, they did really well with the Mega Drive, didn't they? So a lot of these companies were in sort of goodwill with Sega at the time, and unfortunately by the time the Dreamcast come along, they just didn't really bother. But yeah, this is, I don't think this really worked quite as well as the Mega Drive strikes. Again, it's kind of a series that's just been left long forgotten about, really, hasn't it? It's just kind of died in the water. The Hex Effect. So this is Hexen. I don't think this came out on PlayStation. I think it came out on N64, didn't it? It was a first-person shooter in kind of a Dungeons and Dragons kind of sort of setting, really. So, love these old adverts. Hacks, tips, cheats and codes. Win a games console with console helpline. So, Sonic 1 and 2 hints and tips. Call this number. Well, there's only like 2 cheats in Sonic 1. A debug mode and a level select. And a but again, it was the time before... you know, the internet, where we didn't necessarily know. Special Reserve. Used to be one of these in Basildon. Harlow in Essex. There used to be one of these in Basildon. And now what is called Festival Leisure, which is quite well known as Baz Vegas, which is it's more a collection of restaurants and nightclubs in the Basildon area. But originally it was like an out of town centre shopping sort of, you know, like an American style outdoor shopping precinct. And there was a Special Reserve there, and I remember they always used to have you know, they always used to have these adverts in any game system magazine. So Saturn controller, £185. Saturn controller Virtua Fighter 2, £209. So you've got the games, Knights, 50 quid with the pad. Which is probably the going rate for these days anyway. Just trying to look at the most expensive game out there that's probably on there. Mr. Bones, $32.99 probably. Yeah, always interesting to look at these sort of things. Game Zone. Call Dave on 0121 243 0910. Checks, post orders of cash only, please. So this is Die Hard Arcade. I was actually playing this last night, actually, ironically. Not Die Hard Arcade, Dynamite Decker, or Dynamite Cop, as it should be called. No, Dynamite Cop, that's the Dreamcast version. Dynamite Decker. It doesn't play any different, to be honest. It's all in English. All the menus are in English. All the action buttons or whatever else are in English. It gets pretty tough later on, and you've kind of got... The characters are kind of a bit sort of clunky when it comes to the controls. They're almost a bit kind of tank control-ish, sort of Resident Evil style, and obviously adding that to a 3D, you know, fighter or, you know, beat 'em up. It's a bit tricky, but it's one of the better 3D beat 'em ups. Obviously, I know that's one genre that's kind of died away from the 2D, you know, heyday, but this is one of the better games. So this is just giving all the move list. This guy is obviously the Bruce Willis, but it's a strange game because it was developed obviously with no Die Hard license. It was just developed as Dynamite Decker. And they literally just had slapped the Die Hard license on it because the guy had a vague similarity to Bruce Willis, and he was coming. There was an issue. He was being plopped into a building, aka like Die Hard 1. So Fighters Mega Mix, again quite an interesting title. This was before many of the sort of DLC that, you know, character crossovers and, you know, that we see in Tekken 7 and you know, the Dead or Alives. It's a shame really, because Sega have kind of left a lot of their fighters to just waste away really. You know, they're quite a big selection of fighters. You know, 20 odd years ago, obviously Virtua Fighter is probably the biggest, but you know, I think Eternal Champions and Fighting Vipers and Last Bronx, that was never followed up. But yeah, this is quite an interesting one where you've got the mixture of Virtua Fighter characters and fighting Vipers characters, and it's not just that. You've got a whole mixture of kind of Sega related characters. So there's Virtua Cop characters, there's Sonic characters, there's the car from Daytona, which is bizarre. But it was quite an original game back in its day. I don't think it's necessarily the best fighting game on the Saturn. I think that is the best 3D fighting game, I should say. But it's an interesting take, and there's a lot of Virtua Fighter 3 moves in it. It's this guy here, Shiba. He was originally Virtua Fighter 1 character that was dropped. This is the Daytona car. It's quite interesting. You've got Sonic the Fighter's characters, Virtua Fighter Kids as well. So again, that was quite an interesting game as well. On Saturn, Virtua Fighter Kids. So now you have more about it. See the young lads in the day. Oh, there you go. Young lads of the day would get off on CG interpretations of women. So this is Marvel Superheroes. This is a great game. Really, really good. I think these games, these 2D, certainly the Capcom ones, they're just absolutely beautiful these days. Especially with the renaissance that Marvel's had. Marvel's probably bigger than it's ever been before, hasn't it? I mean, even I'm no Marvel nut, but you'd be hard pressed to see, I know Marvel's always been in pop culture, but has it ever been as big as what it is now? I mean, the kids love it. The movies are every movie is $1 billion movie, isn't it? And it kind of when these sort of Capcom games, they kind of makes them feel still quite relevant to a degree. That's X-Men versus Street Fighter as well. Children of the Atom. That was the first one in the sort of Marvel series, I believe, that Capcom produced. And obviously then they worked in with the different licenses as well. Die Hard Arcade, 80%. So as a summary, they said a fun fighting game that's especially suited to novice players, but it's too short-lived for more experienced beat 'em up fans. That's probably quite a good assessment, to be honest. I think graphically it's actually quite good for the era. It's nice colours and it really pops on screen. I do think it's quite fun as well. It's not like a Streets of Rage kind of game where you gradually progress through the level. You're set in certain scenes or certain environments, and then you have to beat the bad guys in that scene, and then the screen goes black, and then you're sort of in a sort of one of these sort of tunnel where you're viewing the guys, and then it's sort of like quick time events where you kick, punch. Obviously this was really early quick time, so it was quite a novelty back then. But obviously the QTE, as they say, made famous by Shenmue. A Crusader, No Remorse. A big but tedious game which tries to get on the combination of unimpressive blasting, interspersed with very simple door opening tests. It's probably quite a harsh review on it, 68%. It's probably quite a harsh review in terms of what that's been given, really. Hexen. Again, I don't really know why they've had such a big sort of preview of it and then a review in the same issue. 3D's a bit jerky, but bearable nonetheless. But more importantly, the Hex excellent. Excellent gameplay remains perfectly intact. Credible conversion. Yeah, it probably is, to be fair. Kind of gets overshadowed by the Saturn's other, by the lobotomy other first-person shooters. So, Die Hard trilogy. I would say this is these games kind of could have all been released individually. The best one I think would probably be the Driver one's pretty good. That's Die Hard with a Vengeance, isn't it? The third person one is really hard work, especially nowadays. And the light gun one is really good as well. So 3 terrific action games for the price of one of the best movie licensed games ever to hit the Saturn. Oh, they gave it 91% by the way. Grid Run. Not familiar with this one. I think I have seen it. I know the artwork, but I couldn't really tell you much about it. It says it's always nice to see something unusual, but Grid Run is destined to be a classic. 79%. That's not bad, to be honest. Andretti Racing. The Marco Andretti. I don't know if he's still alive or not. So you've got like NASCAR and IndyCar and stock cars. It's an American kind of. With wealth options, there's enough to keep you at it for a long time, but it pales in comparison to the awesome Sega Rally and Daytona CCE. You have to bear in mind this is a third-party game, though, isn't it? And the Saturn was a bitch to get going, so I think to get 83 is actually not bad. Tilt. Hitler only had one, but this three-dimensional pinball game lets you play with 5. So of course, Hitler apparently only had 1 testicle, by all accounts. So it's got 89%. 3D mode isn't all it's cracked up to be, but it's still a fine pinball game. That's not bad going, to be fair. 89%. Soviet Strike, 90%. A worthy addition to the Strike series with enhanced gameplay and superior visuals, and it's better than the PlayStation version 2, which is always a good thing. Ooh, the console wars. You wouldn't really get that these days, that kind of, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've read a gaming magazine outside of Retro Gamer, but you kind of don't get that kind of animosity towards the competition these days. I saw a video on YouTube where you had like the CEOs of Nintendo, Sega, and Nintendo, Sony, and Xbox all on stage last week at some event. So these are just tips. Tomb Raider. As said earlier, was a Saturn exclusive up until a point. Then it became a timed exclusive. EXHUMED. So these are just some tips. You can tell the magazine's still quite nice condition considering it's however old. Scud Race. So my good friend Dull, the Retro Godfather, had an arcade machine of this, and I think it still looks amazing these days. I think a lot of these Model 3 games really do look fantastic. So yeah, they really do look great. So you can imagine what it was like back in the day, sort of playing this. But I remember we used to have a Sega park in Basildon, and they had one of these, but it was the full, where you sat down in the cockpit of the car, and it had the full like 50-inch backlit screen, and you know, it used to tilt when you turned, and it was pretty amazing. But yeah, very, I think it was done by AM2. Yeah, AM2. Never ported to a home console, which is a shame. Kind of a lost sort of lost iconic sort of Sega game, really. Shame. I mean, they've got so many back catalogue of arcade games that, especially Model 3 ones, that are just sitting there, that are crying out to be launched, because there isn't really kind of unless you've got a high-end PC, it's really difficult to kind of get these games outside of emulation. Shame, really, because there's so many classic arcade games that are just forgotten about, really. So you can sort of see the visuals. These photos are not great. Obviously they've had to take them with a camera to the arcade. I don't think they. So just on general overview. So Sega Rally got 97%. Virtua Fighter 2 got 98, so only 2% away from being perfect. To be fair, I mean, that was pretty blinding conversion. Street Fighter Alpha 2, 95, Tomb Raider 94, Shining the Holy Ark. Next month it's making CT to the max. We have first full review of this potentially ace biking game along with a brilliant showcase. More on Resident Evil 2, and we've got NBA Jam Extreme. I think this is actually one of the harder sports games to get, or might be the EA one. Is there any NBA 98 or whatever? And finally, we've got Command and Conquer. There's no such thing as Friendly Fire. So yeah, another classic PC game that was made available on the Saturn. So there we go. So this is the issue 17 of the Sega Saturn magazine, and it's March 1997. So it's nearly 3 months away from being 21 years old. No, 22 years old, yeah. Crazy. Okay guys, thank you very much for watching and take care.